type of cultivation that requires a lot of water, but they had this lake Aral available, so they thought cotton is, of course, from an economical point of view, is convenient. They thought to make investments to favor the cultivation of cotton, and they started to get water from the lake and from the tributaries, from the rivers. Basically what happens was that very rapidly, I will show you some pictures, the size of the lake increased, the amount of water stored in the lake increased, and by decreasing the extension of the lake, they provoked a reduction of evaporation and therefore a reduction of rainfall. So the process was irreversible. It was not a remedy to stop getting waters from the lake and the rivers, because meanwhile precipitation decreased and the process was irreversible. These are some pictures that you find on the web of what remains of the Lake Aral. This is the extension of the lake in 1989. It was already very much reduced, the extension, and this is 2003, 14 years passed. 14 years, you see the reduction. Now the extension of the lake is about 10% of the original extension. And again, this picture is already taken after 20 years. It was much more extended, and you see that the lake in practice disappeared. And again, this process is irreversible. So instead of the lake, we now find there a desertic area, and there is no way to revert back the situation. So this is a clear example of bad practice, malpractice in water resources management, which clearly shows that a careful planning is needed, because there are in the Earth system sometimes what are called tipping points, meaning the thresholds that once that you get there, you originate a sudden change in the system, which is irreversible. In this case, this is what happened. There was a threshold beyond which an increased exploitation of water from the lake flipped the situation. It was a tipping point. So the precipitation started to decrease and the lake disappeared. And the process is, as I said, irreversible. Okay, I think I can stop here. But no, sorry, I take a couple of minutes, because this is indeed very simple to explain. And again, as I said, in 1970, 1980, people realized that water resources management was becoming an issue. And in 1992, there was an important conference convened in Dublin, where people set out, and it was a conference where the attendants were the politicians, not just scientists. It was not a scientific conference, it was a political conference where people set out the basic principle of water resources management. And I just would like to close my lecture by reading these principles. And first of all, water is finite. I don't read all the remaining, just the concept is important. Water is finite. And please pay attention on the fact that this concept may seem now obvious to you. At that time, just 20 years ago, it was not. So people needed to clarify that water is finite. Water resources development and management should be based on a participatory approach, which means involvement of stakeholders and society in particular. So it shouldn't be a top-down approach, like politicians decide, but a bottom-up approach. Politicians take the opinion of people, take a consultation with people, and then, of course, they decide. But the approach must be participatory. This is very much important to keep in mind, because people realize that otherwise you trigger conflicts if you don't involve the stakeholders, portatori di interesse, in the discussion. The third principle may seem strange to you, but it is indeed important. Women play a central role in water resources management, so the opinion of women is particularly important. Of course, this may seem to you like a feminist principle after feminism, but it's not. It just wants to emphasize that in the society, for the families, water resources management is a task that is for women. and water as an economic value. This is, again, an important issue. And because, you know, people were not willing to recognize this principle. And if you think about the consultation, the election that we had on the opportunity to admit that water in Italy was managed by private organizations, and you may remember that people were strongly against, this is closely related. If you admit that water has an economic value, there is, in principle, nothing against to admitting that private companies, of course, under the public control, manage water supply and provision of water. And the last two slides are just dedicated to clarifying the fact that indeed it's, the role of women is important. Traditionally in society, for collecting water and managing water is very much important. And this, you may wonder, but why they wanted to put this in highlight? They wanted to put it on the front. Because, you know, in many countries of the world there is still a reluctance to consult with women, to take the opinion of women. So given that water resources management is a global issue, they wanted to stress that during the consultation, women play the most relevant part in this case. I think it's the last one, yes. This is just the role of hydrology, but I just introduced this. Okay, so see you tomorrow.